Live from Washington, D.C., Sekulow Live. Phone lines are open for your questions right now. And now, Chief Counsel for the American Center for Law and Justice, Sekulow.
Welcome to the broadcast, everyone. And we've got a big development, and that development focuses on the issue of ISIS. Why is it significant? For 8 years, President Obama's administration called ISIS the Islamic State in Syria and Levant, ISIL. That was a huge mistake. That was defining your enemy by their aspirations. The Department of Defense last week has issued a statement, and this is very important, folks, clarifying permanently that the Department of Defense will no longer use the designation ISIL. The Levant, by the way, includes, I'm going to put this up on the screen. I want everybody to see this. This is what we're talking about. We're talking about an area of the Middle East that includes Israel.
We have been calling on this for years. We went back through petitions. We had petition back 2 years ago. Mr. President, name the enemy with nearly 100,000 signatures. Another a petition up that also called for calling ISIS its real name. We had a real problem with ISIL, the Islamic State in the Levant, because it described the aspirations of what the Islamic State wanted to be. Now, the administration chose that term because ISIS, it reminded everybody that it was both in Iraq and Syria where the administration, they did not like the constant reminder that I'm talking about the Obama administration, that they had failed when it came to foreign policy in Iraq and Syria, but they also were giving ISIS exactly what they wanted, which was this idea that they could be more expansionist in their look. I mean, the Levant includes Israel.
Yeah, I mean, this idea that you would the idea of defining your enemy by their aspirations is frankly absurd. Now, I want to read for you. This is a huge win, folks. I think we've had 250,000 signatures on various petitions talking about naming the enemy correctly. How many times have I said, stop calling them ISIL? And now but it's important. We're going to get into that with our military analysts a little bit later in the broadcast. But can I just read this exact order from the Department of Defense, from the Secretary of Defense? Naming convention for the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. Consistent with National Security Presidential Memorandum of January 28, 2017, Memorandum Number 3, plan to defeat the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, and guidance from the Secretary of Defense, the Department of Defense will use the term Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, or ISIS, when referring to this threat. I want you to know, folks, this is a major, major victory. Naming the enemy correctly goes a long way in also establishing and setting policies, and also where you're going to curtail them. So this is a gigantic win for the American people, a big win for our military as well, and something I've been calling for literally 3 years here.
People are saying it's excellent news, Jay. Changing it to ISIS is more important than most people think. That's from Steve. I think you're going to see that comment. It has been something we've been talking about for years here on Sekulow Live. And the fact that it was done in a sort of nonchalant way is pretty interesting from the Trump administration.
The fact that they just came out and made it. They didn't make a production about it, Jordan. They just said it.
That's right. It's what the president always referred to. President Trump called them ISIS on the campaign trail. He knew that there were criticisms of these people who called them ISIL, or even that trying to use some derogatory term, Daesh, and instead just call it what it is. It's the Islamic State, and they are in Iraq and Syria. That is where they have actual territorial control. I mean, if you want to get more specific than that, I mean, you can start listing 15 other places now that they've expanded under the Obama administration.
Do that.
The key is
hold on. Logan, go ahead.
Words have consequences.
Go ahead.
No, I was just saying, let's just be honest. Also, the American people have been calling it ISIS the entire time. It's just been the administration. So in somewhat, yes, it's a big deal for us because it means no longer Israel. We'll get into all of that. But it's also Trump's mode to just go into the nomenclature that people use in everyday life.
Yeah, but it's that setting of a tone at the Department of Defense. We're going to call them what the American people call them, what our president calls them, what the world calls them.
And not by their aspirations.
And not just IS. We're going to call them ISIS.
Which, by the way, was the book we wrote 3 years ago. And it was this administration that changed that entire terminology. Folks, the issue is very clear. We need to destroy and defeat ISIS once and for all. We need to be praying for our military, but we need direct action here. We've got a petition urging the president, urging Congress, the Secretary of Defense. Let's engage this enemy and defeat them. ACLJ.org to sign that petition. That's ACLJ.org or 1-877-989-2255. 877-989-2255 or ACLJ.org.
The Islamic State is beheading, crucifying, and slaughtering Christians. ISIS is threatening to terrorize America. It's waging jihadist genocide against Christians, raping women, and enslaving children. The only way to stop this evil and protect Christians is defeat it militarily. Pinprick airstrikes and sending a handful of soldiers into Syria and Iraq won't work. It's already failed. It's time for America to take the lead. It's time for America to protect Christians from genocide. It's time for America to defeat ISIS. Sign on to our new petition today. Destroy ISIS, protect Christians. Call 1-877-989-2255. That's 1-877-989-2255 or add your name online, aclj.org.
Hey, welcome to the broadcast, everyone. If you're just joining us, we've got a big win here, and I want to be clear. This is a big win. This is something we've been calling for 3 years. We said stop defining the Islamic State, ISIS, by their aspirations when they used ISIL, the Islamic State in Iraq and the Levant. The Levant, by the way, includes the state of Israel. So it was the greater Levant is the greater Middle East. So we now have a Department of Secretary of Defense, very clear here. Let me read it again for our entire audience. This is a big win because it's not just about changing a name. It's about changing a way this is perceived. And let me read it to you. It says, this is the Office of the Secretary of State. It's signed by the Executive Secretary. That's a very high position within the State Secretary of Defense's office. Consistent with National Security Presidential Memorandum 3 of January 28, 2017. Plan to defeat ISIS, Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, and guidance from the Secretary of Defense. The Department of Defense will use the term Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, or ISIS, when referring to this threat. And I want to be very clear, this is a major win. We've received hundreds of thousands of signed petitions from you all saying, call the enemy who it is. That means radical terrorism, radical jihadists, but also don't be afraid. Don't start using their definition by their aspirations here. So this was a really positive development.
Absolutely. I mean, the idea is ISIL, for those, again, that you could. There's the part about confusing Americans. But for those who understood what the Levant meant, it meant that we were acknowledging the aspirations of the Islamic State, of what they wanted to accomplish. It was not just about Iraq and Syria, but that it was about expanding into all over the Middle East, into the Gulf states, into Israel, into the Judea and Samaria. And then, of course, their larger aspiration, of course, was to become a caliphate.
Right.
Is to be a caliphate. And they have expanded past that area now into Libya. If you count their allies in Libya and Egypt,
right,
and even like Boko Haram in Western Africa and Al-Shabaab in Eastern Africa.
Yeah, but we've got up a map for our audience on ACLJ.org and Facebook and Periscope. I want to go to it, and I'll describe it for our radio audience. It shows Iraq, Syria, Jordan, Israel, the Palestinian territory. All of that would be within the greater Levant. So there you have it. Also, and Jordan said this too, but Logan, you said it goes back to, and they made this not a big deal.
Right.
And I think that's important here.
I think it is, because I think there's a lot of people that maybe don't watch the news regularly. Part of that we're not connecting, not knowing that maybe that the Obama administration said ISIL. And when everyone did, almost everyone kind of raised an eyebrow and just wasn't sure what he was saying, because everyone calls it ISIS. So I think there is an important part about that. Yes, it's a huge win for our positions and what we have to say about Israel and what we have to say about the Levant in general, and defining them by their aspirations. But it also paints a picture that, again, is speaking towards the American people and making sure they're not confused of what the president is saying, speaking their language. And I think that is an important part of this administration.
I want to go back to the map for a minute, because I want to clarify something for everybody that's up there. So you'll see it says Israel and then the Palestine. There is no state of Palestine. It's on the map because that is Palestinian territory. So understand this. Hamas has Gaza. The Palestinian Authority basically runs those areas of what's quote Palestine. Again, it's not a state. But I think this is important for people to understand, Jordan. Their aspirations were even to take over those areas that were not controlled by Israel.
Yeah, that's right. It's not just about we want to be in Israel. So it's not just we want to be in Iraq, Syria, and Israel. It goes to, again, Jordan. It goes to parts of Lebanon as well. And we know that was just the beginning. That was just the beginning for the Islamic State. They then wanted to expand, and they already have, into North Africa and East Africa and West Africa. And they have done that in Libya. They've done that in Egypt. They have done it in Somalia. And they have done it in Nigeria through Boko Haram and Mali and those areas with those organizations. You've got Al-Shabaab in Somalia that's pledged allegiance to ISIS. In Libya, there's an Islamic State group. And in Egypt, there is ISIS in the Sinai. So, again, I think use the correct terminology. We repeat that so often on this broadcast. Call the enemy who they are. Name them correctly. Don't try to confuse people about it. Be clear. Be direct. We are fighting the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria.
Let's go ahead and take a call.
All right, let's go to Jerry, who's calling in Oklahoma.
Hi, Jerry.
On line 4. Jerry, you're on the air.
Yeah, hey, Jay, I've called before. I get so nervous when I call.
Don't be nervous.
Hey,
I get nervous on the air, too, so I understand. Go ahead, Jerry.
Hey, I'm a reader, and I've bought your Unholy Alliance and Undemocratic and Sharia in America.
Great.
I haven't been able to find your Rise of ISIS, and did I hear you say just a few minutes ago y'all have some available?
They are available on Amazon also, but I'm going to tell you what, Rebecca, we're going to say. There was a lot of ISIS books have sold. I mean, we've probably sold, hundreds of thousands of books.
It was the number one in the New York Times bestseller.
It was number one bestseller in the New York Times, and we were way ahead of the curve. There's a picture of it right there. We're going to send you one. Now, when the time we wrote ISIS, they were the Islamic State in Syria and Iraq, and Syria, and we used the moniker ISIS because that's who they were. They had that territory. It was the administration that expanded this out to their aspiration, which, and I'm talking about the Obama administration, which was a horrible move. But this correction, I want to tell you something, is very, very significant.
Yes, it's that, again, I think it goes to that bureaucracy problem. I can't wait to see how they respond, because I'll show for our Facebook and Periscope audience, this memorandum is very short. I mean, it's one sentence that we are now calling them Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. But it goes to, if you're looking on Facebook and Periscope, now it's up on the screen, the number of people, all the secretaries of the military departments, chairman of Joint Chiefs, undersecretaries of defense, deputy chief management officers, National Guard, Coast Guard, combatant commands, the general counsel, so the legal office, cost assessment and program evaluation, inspector general, operational test evaluation, chief information officer, assistant secretary of defense for legislative affairs, so when they're on Capitol Hill, the assistant to the secretary of defense for public affairs, so when they're speaking to the American people, director of net assessment, network capabilities, strategic capabilities, director of defense agencies, directors of defense agencies, and directors of DoD field activities. They have basically instructed the entire, which is our largest, I think, federal bureaucracy, is the Department of Defense,
significant.
To change it everywhere it appears, whether it is in reports that American people are not going to take a look at, whether it is the public statements that are important, whether it is in the battlefield commands, that everywhere at this happened a couple weeks ago. It's public now today, but it's dated February 13th. So they've made this letter now official. And I think, again, that was a move that the Trump administration made within their first month of taking office.
I know I sound like a broken record here. This is really big, folks. We have been asking for this for 7.5 years, and we're going to get into in the next segment. We're going to talk about what does that mean militarily. But we've been talking about this for 7.5 years, that this was a mistake. What are we seeing online and in social media, Logan? Then I probably don't have time for a call. We'll take a call during the next segment. But what are you hearing on social media? Yeah,
a lot of people are just pleased with this. They're definitely seeing this as a victory when it comes to the support of the ACLJ. So I'll get some specific comments during the break here when we come up. But again, a lot of people are just happy.
Yeah.
We also know now, heading into the joint session of Congress, tied into this issue, the president is having plans being delivered to him tomorrow from various government agencies. So different options on how to destroy and eliminate the Islamic State. And so I think this all ties in together with that, why they release this information now, and then we'll get the information about President Trump will get this information. I don't think he's going to disseminate this out, these various plans. He will then choose a plan. He doesn't have to choose one of the plans. By the way, he could say, go back to the drawing table. I don't like any of these.
Yeah, a good comment came in from Ellen on Facebook, said, so glad we don't have to hear ISIL anymore. That's great news. It was very disrespectful to people.
I think it was, well, that was like you said, the thing about Daesh. I mean, they were defining it like a pejorative at that point, which that did nothing either.
No, that just fuels the enemy's fire. So on the one hand, we're like demeaning them unnecessarily when we're just defining who our enemy is. On the other hand, they were going to their aspirations, which again
that was such a bad strat. We'll talk to Skip and Wes about that coming up from the break.
And I think for the local people who are actually dealing with ISIS and under ISIS control, that was also harmful to say, look, they're going to spread even further.
This was a big win.
Yeah, it is.
It really is. I mean, it's a big win, and I want to thank our entire audience. I mean, this is calling the enemy by the right name here. Maybe we're going to defeat them. We've got a lot more ahead on this issue of ISIS. We'll be joined by our senior military analysts. I encourage you to go to ACLJ.org to sign that petition to destroy and defeat ISIS. You sign those petitions to get the enemy name right. We've now won that. Now let's take it the next step. Time to destroy and defeat ISIS. ACLJ.org. That's ACLJ.org or 1-877-989-2255. That's 1-877-989-2255 or ACLJ.org. Back with more in a moment.
The Islamic State is beheading, crucifying, and slaughtering Christians. ISIS is threatening to terrorize America. It's waging jihadist genocide against Christians, raping women, and enslaving children. The only way to stop this evil and protect Christians is defeat it militarily. Pinprick airstrikes and sending a handful of soldiers into Syria and Iraq won't work. It's already failed. It's time for America to take the lead. It's time for America to protect Christians from genocide. It's time for America to defeat ISIS. Sign on to our new petition today. Destroy ISIS, protect Christians. Call 1-877-989-2255. That's 1-877-989-2255 or add your name online, aclj.org.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. We've got some big news, and we are very pleased with this. And again, I think Jordan and Logan said this. We're not pleased that, this is great, but it is great that the administration is going to call the enemy by the enemy's name, not by their aspirations. So if you're just joining us, here's what's happened. Consistent with National Security Presidential Memorandum Number 3, that was dated January 28, 2017 by President Trump, quote, entitled Plan to Defeat the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, and guidance from the Secretary of Defense, the Department of Defense will use the term Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, or ISIS, when referring to this threat. That was confirmed by the Pentagon spokesperson, Captain Jeff Davis. So that is a big win. By the way, these issues are significant. They're developing, but we want to get into a little bit of what this now means. But I want to say something here to our friends I get a lot of inquiries about this. How do you get this kind of training? How do these people know these kind of this information? People have asked me about that. Well, look, we are affiliated with Regent University School of Law. Jordan's a graduate of Regent University. I have a PhD from Regent University. Wes Smith, who you're about to hear from, is getting an MA in law from Regent University. And Skip Ash, in our studio in Virginia Beach, is at our studio at Regent University.
I've been to Regent University.
Yes, Logan has been to Regent University.
I've been to many graduations there.
Yes, you have. And I want to encourage you, if you're thinking about law school, a JD, a Master's of Arts, whatever it might be, regent.edu. Regent.edu. Check that law school out, because you're going to hear from experts that were trained right there. I wanted to say that to get that very clear.
Beautiful campus.
Beautiful campus.
Or online.
Yeah, yep, online. Or both. Wes is doing both. All right, let's go ahead first. I want to set it up. Jordan, quickly, politically, what does this mean? Then we're going to go right to the military.
Politically, I think it sets the tone. It sets a tone that we are going to speak the language of the American people and of the news media. We're not going to act like this elitist past administration that want to come up with their own terminology for everything, including, by the way, I think it was part of that bureaucracy that we've talked about, that shadow government idea. This is how you start cutting that down, is by telling all those bureaucrats, we don't care about your fancy terminology that, by the way, made the enemy out to be more expansive than they have been.
Right.
Because I think, this would be more appropriate. That's exactly what they were doing. It was all diplomatic and bureaucratic,
yep.
and this is an end to that. So politically, finally everybody is going to use the same terminology. So when we hear from our president tomorrow night in the joint session,
ISIS.
like he has before, he'll say ISIS, and so will the rest of his government.
Yeah, it's
and
all the
that's
rest of the world.
Yes.
All right. So, Wes, from your end, you've been in that region. You've served in that region. What does this mean to the troops, too?
It is a tremendous morale booster because strategically, by the president and the Pentagon doing this, naming the enemy, it's important strategically for 2 or 3 reasons. First of all, naming the enemy, that kind of clarity always raises the morale of the troops. They can handle almost anything, but they need to know what they're up against, what they're handling. But also, in addition to clarity raising the morale, this denies our enemy not just of their aspirations, which certainly would be a blow to their morale and to their recruitment, but this isn't just about aspirations, Jay. According to ISIS, they already believe that even now that they are the moral, political, and religious authority over that region of the world, including Israel. They just think it hasn't come to pass yet, but they see themselves as the moral, religious, political authority over the entire region.
Yep.
And this says to them an emphatic no. And basically, the third thing is it puts them on notice that their defeat is not a matter of if, it's when.
All right. So, Skip Ash, Senior Counsel for the ACLJ, charge of our International Law and Military Law Project, graduate of Regent University Law School and Johns Hopkins School of Public Policy. I'm saying this is a big win, Skip. And I know Logan said something that's right here. I mean, it's, you're celebrating naming your enemy, correct? But that's how low this got. I mean, so give me your reaction to this.
Well, I think you're exactly right. What happens here is the troops require clarity. They need to know who the enemy is so they can defeat the enemy. What is happening right now is that Mr. Trump is defining who the enemy is clearly for the soldiers, and that he's imposing discipline within his administration so that they have one vision of what's going to happen. So the entire administration will be focused on defeating ISIS, who they are, where they are, and what needs to be done. So I think it's a significant change and a significant clarity.
All right, let's go ahead and take a phone call. Logan, who's next?
That's right. Let's go ahead. Let's take Kim, who's calling on line 4. Kim,
hey, Kim.
Here.
Jay, do you think that now that the name is out there, that the pastors in America are going to wake up and start talking about this in our churches?
Well, I mean, look, I think the whole Islamic threat thing has been a big issue, and it's been very confusing for people. It's been almost cross currents going on here. I think Jordan's a fair way to look at it. And it wasn't just ISIS. Remember, first it was these IS, then it was ISIS, then it was ISIL, then it was Daesh, which was again, like you said, the pejorative.
Supposed to be a derogatory term. Yeah. I think that, listen, you have two branches of churches going on in our country. One I strongly disagree with, which is it's even happening in some of the more conservative Southern Baptist Convention. Some within it, not all. Let me make that clear, because there's plenty of Southern Baptist leaders and churches that aren't doing it. But some are trying to have all this open dialogue. There are some Muslims, we work with Zuhdi Jasser and others, that you can have dialogue with. I'd say it needs to be very selective, and that most pastors don't have the training or even the intelligence level of this information. They would be great on Scripture to be dealing with this quote-unquote interfaith dialogue. We're not talking about rabbis and your priest coming
right.
and a priest and a pastor coming together, if you will. We're talking about bringing the imam into that, so it's no longer the joke anymore.
Right.
And what we know is that the radicalism level is so extreme that your pastor may not pick up on it. So a lot of this interfaith, well, I get the idea generally, needs to be done only by experts.
Yeah.
Who have vetted the people coming to the table.
And let me explain something about that, because it ties in what I just mentioned about our law school. I think this is really important. We spend a lot of time and effort here at the ACLJ training our team. And, Skip has had extensive training both in the military and outside, both at Regent Law School and other universities attended. By the way, Skip was a colonel in the United States Army, retired. Wes is a colonel in the United States Army, retired, has multiple degrees as well, is currently taking the Masters of Law program, focusing in on terrorism at Regent University Law School. So again, when people ask me about law schools, that's why I say regent.edu for law school. Do we have a comment we want to take, or I want to ask? We only have a minute and 58 here.
Most people are sharing very similar notions that this is a big deal. Thank you much for explaining it and stopping the confusion. That's from Mitzi on Facebook. Lauren just said, what did ISIL mean? Why did they even go with the ISIL?
So let's be very clear on this. I'm going to let everybody respond. I'm going to go quick. They wanted Levant was how they were defining them by their aspirations. I thought that was, Wes, a terrible move.
Absolutely. And like I said, it's not just their aspirations. In their mind's eye, they see themselves as being the legitimate power.
Yep, absolutely. Jordan?
They didn't want to include also Syria in the official name, even though that's where their headquarters, their second headquarters, main headquarters in Syria, because it pointed to the fact that the administration has, now we can say they failed, as they're done, to defeat ISIS while they were in office.
Skip, your sense.
I said the same thing. The Levant includes Israel and all sorts of areas that they desire to take, and that's not where they are. We should not let them get away with that.
I sat down with the vicar of Baghdad, who has experienced the treachery of ISIS, Canon Andrew White.
I want to talk about ISIS because you were there. I've looked at it legally, I've looked at it politically, I've written about it, we've studied it. Our view is they have to be crushed. There's no negotiations with them. This is not where you can have any kind of dialogue. This is not even the Iranians. This is a whole different element of evil. You've been there. You've seen it firsthand. What do you do with them?
I've tried.
And you're a guy that does reconciliation. I mean, that's your ministry.
I've tried. It can't work.
Why?
Why? Because they feel they have lost so much, and they're going to make the others lose as much as they've lost.
Yet they're attracting educated people. They're attracting people that had businesses. They're attracting young people that had college degrees from England, from the United States, from Canada. It's an interesting sociological dynamic. They treat women horribly, but yet they're attracting women. There's a case right now where 3 young girls from Britain have gone through Turkey to get to Iraq and Syria to join up with ISIS, and to go through that. And these were modern Muslim younger women,
but stupid.
Well, stupid, and they may not come out alive.
And they want to
once
again demonstrate the power of Islam.
When I talked with Andrew White, I talked about a professor I had at the University of Oxford in a program I participated in several years ago at Exeter College, where we studied the issue of radicalization with terrorism. It was a phenomenal program. I was thrilled to study at Oxford. But let me tell you this, folks, and I want to be very clear here. There was the professor who said to me, we've got to crush them. And I believe that is exactly right. So now we've named the enemy, and that's good. Now the next step is crush that enemy, ISIS, once and for all. ACLJ.org to sign on to that petition to do just that. That's ACLJ.org or 1-877-989-2255. Add your voice to hundreds of thousands. ACLJ.org or 1-877-989-2255. We'll talk to you next week.
The Islamic State is beheading, crucifying, and slaughtering Christians. ISIS is threatening to terrorize America. It's waging jihadist genocide against Christians, raping women, and enslaving children. The only way to stop this evil and protect Christians is defeat it militarily. Pinprick airstrikes and sending a handful of soldiers into Syria and Iraq won't work. It's already failed. It's time for America to take the lead. It's time for America to protect Christians from genocide. It's time for America to defeat ISIS. Sign on to our new petition today. Destroy ISIS, protect Christians. Call 1-877-989-2255. That's 1-877-989-2255, or add your name online, aclj.org.